Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. So welcome to Chatham House, and welcome to another event that we're organizing during the London Climate Action Week. And so this is the event Financing the BioEconomy, and this is a partnership that we have with the World BioEconomy Forum. And so I will just, my job here today is just to welcome you, and just to a couple of housekeeping. So today, in spite of the meeting being held at Chatham House, the meeting is not under the Chatham House rule. So that means that, whatever is discussed here, you can share freely. Please share freely, please share widely, because I think we're trying to push an agenda forward, which is critically important for the delivery of climate and biodiversity objective. So what we have today is it's a hybrid model. So we have participants here in the room, speakers in the room, and we also have speakers online and people watching us online. And so basically we're gonna have a session, 2 hours. The first hour or so will be speakers sharing their thoughts. And then the second half, it will be a wide open sort of roundtable with questions from the participants joining us online as well. So it's kind of a funny hybrid, but we're trying to catch as many participants as possible. So welcome. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Jukka. And thank you everyone for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Anna Young. And also I'm very, very pleased to have this event this time from London. My name is Jukka Kantala. I'm the founder of the World BioEconomy Forum. And our nature is to organize this kind of public event. This is indeed a public event, so it is not organized according to Chatham House rules, so be aware of that. But I hope that it does not limit you to express yourself in this interesting topic what we are going to discuss today. Today we have a topic on financing the bioeconomy, and I think that we are having a very impressive lineup of the speakers who are going to share their experience on this space. We are having a keynote speakers after our short introduction. So please be active, and we do also have here in-person people in this same space that we are here together with Anna Young. So please challenge us all whenever you are ready to address any questions. So from the World BioEconomy Forum point of view, this is third roundtable for this year. Our previous roundtable was organized together with our with our African partners, and that was about biostrategies. And our first roundtable this year was organized together with our Latin American partners, and on that topic we were discussing mainly about the biotechnology. I feel that we are also having that topic in today's discussion, so it is getting so important. Before getting into this today's topic, I'd like to share a couple of slides about how do we see the status of the bioeconomy. We just recently, during the springtime, conducted a study, what's the status of the bioeconomy. And we selected the certain areas like Brazil, there was US, Canada, EU, India, and China. That was then the status, what are the latest developments in this space. I'm happy to share some of the findings of that survey. You see now my slides, so Tammy, can you take the next one? I think I covered this mostly, but this few words about the World BioEconomy Forum. So this is pretty young initiative in comparison to Chatham House. So we only have a good 5 years history. It was launched 2018, and we think our role is then facilitate the developments of the circular bioeconomy. And how do we do that? We do that through these public events like today, through roundtables and conferences. And then we are running the membership programs with this pretty new feature for us. We introduced that last year. We currently have some 25 members within this circle. And while we are into this space, we are also providing advisory services. What makes us particular is that, we are explaining the bioeconomy through the 4-pillar structure, and it is comparable to the SWOT analysis. So whenever any company or organization is about the composing the strategy, quite often, okay, first thing to do is that, okay, let's make the SWOT analysis. And only after that, you are then, okay, deriving your strategy. Within the bioeconomy, that, okay, yeah, we can certainly use the SWOT analysis, but besides that, okay, that we prefer to use this 4-pillar structure with this way to explain this, okay, the bioeconomy, and it's also a way to engage in the various type of, okay, bioeconomy stakeholders into this debate. And the 4 pillars are the bioeconomy people finance policies, where we are typically having a look about the policies and regulations as the name implies. Then there's a business pillar, corporate leaders in the financial world, as we are here today. Then we are having a bioproduct around us, which is then, okay, the way that we are engaging, okay, even already consumers. We think that, okay, the bioeconomy need to be then, okay, sort of comprehended by the consumers. So that's then, okay, the typical, okay, territory for, okay, the companies and the institutes. And then finally, you need to then include these all, and that we do through this look into the future with this then, okay, where we are then covering the societal matters. The next slide. And then, okay, the landscape, how do we see it, okay, the bioeconomy? So as the name implies that there is this economy factor, so let's bear that on mind. Today, let's say all global economy value is about $100 trillion according to IMF. And now there are expectations that the value of the bioeconomy will increase to level $30 trillion. And okay, it is corresponding 1/3 of the whole economical activities. That's very boldly said. We are not saying that, but this is, okay, very much a basis for the recent, let's say, biostrategy update in US. They, you know, announced that, okay, executive order, and they are saying that very clearly and loudly that's what they are then heading to. And it's not only US, the very same notion you can hear from China. You know, China also announced their biostrategy last year. They announced it, okay, very first national biostrategy, May 2022, and the very same kind of notion you can read out of there. So that's notable. Then, okay, I think this biotech can hear that, okay, there are notions that bio-revolution is knocking on the door. So, you know, we are about, okay, shifting from, okay, third industrial revolution to the, okay, fourth industrial revolutions, and you know, what does it then mean? So, okay, the biotechnology, okay, combining all these digital tools. So I think that, okay, Neil Barry from Unilever will tell us about this, and maybe Jim Philp will tell about this. That what does it then mean that then you can touch by yourself? That, okay, and then, okay, the number of the biostats. But let's go for the next slide. Then about then, okay, some results of the survey we made. This last 16 months, okay, we are claiming that it was a very, very dynamic time period for the bioeconomy. So within this study, we have, okay, evaluated, okay, the bioeconomies through then the biotechnology, bioresource, bioeconomic vision, what is the approach in the different areas, and then we were having a look at what are the sectors of interest. So there is a more comprehensive, okay, study available. Please contact us if you would not like more on it. But here some, let's say, okay, takeaways on it. You know, okay, some messages. We feel that, okay, this bioeconomy is more, okay, is getting more acknowledged. You know, okay, it is discussed also in other important international forums. For example, last year it was the very first time that, okay, the COP27 did have the bioeconomy panel on agenda that was organized by UNIDO. So it was a very, very, very first time to have it in that forum. And then this year, you know, India is taking the bioeconomy for the very first time on the agenda of G20. I would claim that it takes only, okay, a couple of years, and people see the very same also about G7. So in a way, it is only the, okay, let's say, underscore the importance of the bioeconomy. Yeah, that's a good thing. Then, okay, there are different, let's say, approaches in the bioresources, and okay, bioeconomy need to be tackled, need to balance with the other interfaces when it comes to land use, climate change, biodiversity. That is all recognizable. And in a way, having looked like, for example, okay, if you start again from the west, okay, US is currently using 400 million tons of the domestic biomass, 400 million tons. And now they are heading that, okay, to let's say, okay, deploy 1 billion tons of the domestic biomass. Whereas in EU, the situation is a bit opposite. EU is that, okay, deploying some 1 billion tons of biomass annually. But the policies are very much indicating we should use less. Whereas, okay, when you have a look like, okay, Rosshampton, who is here also knows very well that, okay, like, okay, forest resources in EU are today 50% higher than they were, okay, like in 1990. So in a way, there are some mixed messages. When it comes to China, China is consuming 3.5 billion tons of, okay, biomass, and okay, not all necessarily all domestic, but okay, but that's already, okay, indicating, okay, in their strategies of, okay, China is, okay, willing to have in a better control on their biomass. They would like to have better measure on that, paving the way that they are then, okay, later on, okay, having a better conservation on the, okay, the biomass and the resources, and on the other hand, they are looking after, okay, they're, let's say, using more of the, okay, domestic biomass. So again, they are shifting also to that direction. I already mentioned these biotechnologies, but what is also remarkable is that, okay, you know, this biosecurity and biosafety matters are emerging, and that you can read out, especially in US, China, and partially in India. And also very interesting is that, okay, like in the US, is that, okay, Department of Defense is playing a quite pivotal role on this all. So in a way, to setting up, okay, the ecosystem for the biomanufacturing and so on, okay, also, okay, the funding is partially deployed through the, okay, Department of, okay, Defense. So okay, but all these, okay, can be funded. And then, okay, while they haven't looked, okay, so much going on this is bioeconomy, there's also talk about this, that, okay, whether it is, let's say, okay, time is mature enough to set up the global hub or any kind of arrangement. And that's the reason we are organizing for this year survey. Let's say the next slide. This is my final slide. Okay, that where we are asking your advice about this topic. That, okay, this what kind of issues the bioeconomy should be then discussed in the international level, because there is no really a place for it today. And we don't mean that, okay, need to be a COP type of IPCs type of arrangement. It can be any type of arrangement. We need your advice on that. We are asking that for you, and that, okay. So the second question is that, okay, hovering that. So how, okay, should be then managed, and then, okay, and finally, how should we then, okay, finance? So we launched this survey within the first roundtable this year, 15th of February, and this survey will be open until end of September. And final result we are unfolding, okay, towards end of this year. So please participate in that. You can find this from the survey link and also from our website. And okay, and I hope that, okay, this will benefit all of us within, okay, the bioeconomy. And the next final slide to conclude. So we think there has been a very let's say, okay, dynamic time period for the okay, bioeconomy since beginning of 2022. There is superpowers who are then putting more effort into this space. I feel this is only good for the bioeconomy itself, because it is then, okay, sort of okay, facilitating, okay, the entire sector developments. The value of the bioeconomy is emerging not only, okay, from the monetary point of view, but okay, from the importance point of view. So it is, okay, providing sort of solutions for, okay, mankind. Biotechnology is increasing, mixed approach on the bioresources, need to balance, okay, with various other interfaces. Biosecurity, biosafety are taking the bigger role. Health issue are pivotal in emerging bioeconomies, and there's interest, okay, for a global hub bioeconomy. So with this word, I would like to hand over back to Anna.
Thank you. So the first part of this conversation, we're going to have two keynotes. So it's called Investing in the Bioeconomy. And each of the speaker will have two of them joining us online, and they'll have around 10 minutes. So we have Jim Phelps. So he's from the Science and Technology he's a Science and Technology Policy Analyst at OECD, who has really long track record working in the bioeconomy space. And we also have Mariagiovanna Vetere, I hope I pronounced your name right, as a Global Public Affairs Director from NatureWorks LLC. Jim, should I hand over to you first?
Okay, thank you. And I hope I can share my screen successfully here. So can you see that in presentation mode?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. So let me dive straight into this because I've got 13 substance slides and I've got 10 minutes, so I can't really hang around here. So let me say why we're doing this. We're doing some work now in this 2-year period, which started in January. In the previous 2-year period, we were working on net zero carbon management, and from that period, what we decided we should do in this 2-year period is to look at investment. It was quite obvious that this is the biggest policy area for us in OECD and public policy, because what we normally talk about here is public investment to de-risk private investment. But one of the things we are very keen to explore is how do we de-risk those public investments? Now, one of the reasons I say this is so much money that goes into science and technology has got very little way in the comeback if something doesn't work. And the problem with that is, we might call that failure. In the academic world, they'll say, well, the failures lead to more research, new avenues of research, which is perfectly valid. My point is, though, that our sister organization, the IEA, says we are only got about 50% of the technologies which will be needed by 2050 to bring us to net zero. And if you think about it, everybody in the audience from the chemical sector, chemical industry, you'll know that 2050 is very close. It's in fact in the chemical sector, it's 2 innovation cycles from now. So we've got very little room for failure. So what we're thinking of in this biennium is looking at public investments which are de-risked. And for example, if it's upstream R&D, we can't just rely on scientific excellence. We have to look at the environmental credentials and the techno-economic aspects and energy balance. Several of my delegates to the OECD say to me quite regularly that they get plenty of applications for R&D cash, but hardly anybody ever looks at the demonstration phase or full-scale phase and how to make sure that those technologies developed at the bench can be scaled. So for anything which is near the market, the TRL transition is important, and the complete value chain. I'll come back to the complete value chain later on when I look at the infrastructure at scale, and also the social impact are really important. So this is one of the things we have to look at, that everybody tells us that there are plenty of bioeconomy investment barriers. One of the things we've realized, I mean, to me, it's a boring topic to talk about definitions, but actually it is really fundamental that in the way that governments spend their money is to get the definitions right and the language right. Regulatory barriers, well, we know the US has been pressing for a long time to update the regulatory framework for biotechnology, for example. So what we often see here is that the main barriers, to investment are the market and its regulation. But we hear an awful lot now about the sustainability issues, and that's almost always got a deep focus on greenhouse gas emissions. And one of the catchphrases that's spoken about now is sustainability tunnel vision, which means if you only focus on greenhouse gas emissions, things will go wrong elsewhere, particularly effects on things like biodiversity. And we don't actually have a great deal of track record in measuring sustainability. Everybody that's been in biotech knows there are oodles and oodles of technological barriers, which I hope I can partially address. And finally, these investment barriers, which represent multiple value chain sources of risk. Again, I'll have a slide I'll come to later. One of the problems in this transition is we're up against a petrochemical and an oil industry, which is extremely efficient in the way it works. But a lot of the problem also exists in the fact that in many countries, these fossil companies are very close to politics, and therefore they have vested interest, and therefore this barrier which we have in the bioeconomy, where the economies, the technologies are untried at scale, is up against a very efficient and politically savvy fossil industry. So therefore, the bridging the gap between the laboratory and the commercial production to this day in bio-based are formidable financial barriers. Now, Yuka showed you this slide in small scale. Now, if we look at the left, this thing here is, how modern manufacturing works, where you can completely separate design from manufacture. One area I work in is bicycles. You often see a bicycle which has been designed in the United Kingdom and has been manufactured in Taiwan. That's classic engineering manufacturing nowadays. So on the left here, which is called the biofoundry, the engineering biology part, is the ability to optimize organisms for biomanufacturing. And we've been saying for a while, in this design, build, test, learn cycle, this has been completely missing. And this is a missing link in biomanufacturing that we hope will solve some of these technical barriers in the future. Now, so this talk is going to be, first of all, the synthetic biology part, which is the design, and then later, the much more expensive part, the actual manufacture. So this is actually rather simple just now, because this is, a lot of it, the investment has been upstream. So I've given you this slide here from our sister organization, the International Energy Agency, which looks at energy investments from 2018 to 2020. The different color bars represent 18, 19, and 20. So you see there, I've circled right at the end, renewables for transport and heat. It is tiny compared to fossil investments. So if you look at the upstream oil and gas, you're looking basically $500 billion in investment in at least 2 of those years. And even coal, which is supposed to be on the way out, you can see there, coal supply investments dwarf renewables for transport and heat. But have a look at this one. Now, synthetic biology has always been touted as the next big thing. And these are the data very recently from SynBioBeta. And they are saying that in 2022, the investments in synthetic biology were about 10 billion. Let me go back. You put 10 billion on there and you barely see it. And this is part of the problem just now. There is this huge amount of hope and hype around things like synthetic biology, and yet the investments, although many of the protagonists claim tremendous investment, they're actually tiny, even compared to investments in coal. So here's one of the mechanisms. This is relatively new. This is an investment scheme run out of Imperial College in London, where you are just now, called SynBioVen, and it's a relatively small fund, I guess. But one of the things that's attractive here is that SynBioVen isn't just dishing out money to startups, because they have a lot of interest in business development and financing, and they can offer those types of services as well as throwing money at young companies. And it also gives them access to this word, you see the word there again, BioFoundry, this the R&D hub in London, to help with the early costs and expertise in getting these things done. This one here is more about a country, and this is indirect support, really. France has been very agile in doing support for startups. This isn't just about biotech, of course, but they go through the research tax credits. They've been extremely successful in setting up different types of clusters across the country, specialized clusters that give business support in the many regions of the country. And France wants to attract foreign startups as well. So they have opportunities for partnerships with research labs, tailor-made tax regime for startups, and also the very bottom bullet point there is the ability to interact with key ministries and agencies to get those companies some increased visibility. So in this short talk, let me now turn to the infrastructure at scale, which is a very, very different proposition requiring much higher levels of investment. So I said I'd go back to this about value chain risks. So you can identify risks at various stages. We all know there are feedstock risks and technology risks I've discussed. Market risk just now it's a competition with fossil and regulatory risk, but the middle bullet there, the systemic risk, is very important, because what we're saying here is in all the parts of a value chain, it's all very well having a nice shiny biotech process or biorefinery, but if you can't secure the feedstocks and you can't secure the customers, then you have a very serious systemic risk, because like any chain, it's only going to be as strong as the weakest link. So have a look at this one from what was called the Bio-Based Industries Joint Undertaking in Europe. It's now the Circular Bioeconomy Europe Joint Undertaking. And if you talked to us about 10 years ago, you would have said this was impossible. They have, it's a public-private partnership, and they've been able to build 13, in fact, there are 14 flagship biorefineries in this diagram here. And one of the things that they will tell you at the CBEJIU is if you approach them with a great idea for a biorefinery, but you don't have a complete value chain, you're not going to get the money. And that's important to prevent failure. In other words, like I said before, secure feedstocks and secure customers, or you don't get the cash, no matter how nice the ideal it might look. And this is my second last slide. It's about the X Prize. And I just think the public sector can learn from this. So I won't go into detail here, but this was a previous carbon removal X Prize. And all I'm going to say about this is it was a 5-year process. And the point is that you have these various gates along the way during that 5 years, and all of these are supposed to weed out the weakest ones and support the strongest ones. In other words, this is a way to prevent failure. So that's the process. And my final slide here is about the criteria. And I think that there's at least one gentleman I know in the audience, Mr. Jeff Passmore, will be very interested in some of these points here. So, like I said earlier, don't just rely on a very nice idea. You've got to look in the X Prize at the costs over the life of the project, all the risks and all the liabilities are going to be there. The ability to make valuable goods and co-products rather than, say, like biofuels where there is very little bio added. Third-party verification, meet and exceed the best practices. And I've put the most important thing here, I guess, is the ability to show that your plan can achieve a gigaton scale of removal during the time horizon. And that's really important, again, is the ability to show that you can have demonstration and then full scale. So I'll leave it at that. I think I'm probably about on time, but thanks for your time today, people.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. Yeah, you were actually on time. So I'm going to hand over to Mariagiovanna. Thank you. We lost Maria.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my slide. Just a second. I don't have the share button. So if you have them anyway, so you can share them too. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yes, I didn't change them, so that's fine. Yes, perfect. So thank you very much for inviting me today. And by the way, I'm calling from Rome, where we are having right now the members meeting, the yearly members meeting of the Italian BioEconomy cluster. So really, bioeconomy in practice, we are just debating about what is needed to push even forward the bioeconomy strategy in our country and in general in Europe, also because many members of the cluster, Cluster Spring, the Italian bioeconomy cluster, are international companies like my company, but many others who have premises in Europe or outside Europe. So actually, bioeconomy is something that can go beyond the national borders, and is one of the beauty of these activities. Next. So our company, what do we do? Why we are a practical case? Back in 1989, we say here, we had a crazy idea, and what if we could turn greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide into products? What does it mean in practice? In practice, it means that we produce a biopolymer, polylactic acid, and we do it starting from sugar. This sugar is produced in a biorefinery. So we actually put in practice bioeconomy. Next. So a little bit of how our history developed until now. So at the very beginning, the idea was to try to find new applications for the production of sugar that is in US, with the US corn, which is huge production. Together with Dow Chemicals, which at the time was our partner, we decided to invest in products, which is what bioeconomy is, right? So using natural resources to produce chemicals and products. In our case, it's a bioplastic. And we kept growing along the time. So from the very initial plant, we started to see market growing, and we checked, by the way, the box of having the supply chain and having the customers. The production of lactic acid increased, the production of our polymer increased, and we could increase and let's say expand our production capacity along the years, getting until that we saw the possibility to really grow more, because we needed also to grow. As the market was growing, our supply needed to grow too. So we decided to invest in another plant, and actually we announced the investment, and we are actually started also to building a new plant. Is one of the country, and was not probably shown in the map before, which has a bioeconomy strategy. And is very confident in their bioeconomy strategy, because they are trying to attract investment for biomaterials like the one we produce, really to fit into their strategy of decarbonize, defossilize their production. Next. Yep, so this is our plant today, the one that is producing. So you can see here the capacity. This is the picture of the actual plant, which is based in the large biorefinery site. And we are one of the few biopolymer producers which work at scale, considering that today bioplastic production is not comparable in terms of size. It's still a niche production if you compare it with the big oil production. But you have a panelist, Marco from Braskem, he will tell probably even more about this topic. So how bioplastic is gaining space at the moment. Next. Thank you. So this is a bit about the process, which is 100% bio-based, because what we do is really using sugar from plants. Sugar is produced, lactic acid is then produced by fermentation from the sugar. And this comes from the photosynthesis that the plants capture the carbon from the atmosphere. So our production is really taking carbon from the atmosphere, capturing in the resin, and then it is stored and kept in the resin until it is released at the end of life of the products. It depends on the products. They have different end of life and different moments when this CO2 is released in the atmosphere. So the impact of our materials on the market, but on the environment in general, is very good, with a very low carbon intensive production and a low carbon intensive product. Next. So this is the number of different items that we can produce with our material, because polylactic acid is polyester. We call it Ingeo. This is our brand. And it can be used in many different applications, which is good because it goes from short life products like packaging to long life products like durable goods. You see a refrigerator here, or textiles from home furniture. You see 3D printing filaments. But what we try to do is not only to have a product which is fully bio-based, and it needs to be performant. So to really have a bioeconomy which is working and which is sort of complementing what we see today from the incumbent, and then in the future replace some of the fossil-based materials, really needs to have performances. So it's very important also the research part that was mentioned before, not only from new companies and new ventures or new startups, but also already existing companies are working a lot on research to improve performances in a way that they can be competitive on the market and can be competitive against the fossil-based incumbent. Next. These are our environmental credentials. And as you can imagine, I answer to these questions like every now and then. So what is needed to do, how your company, how your material is impacting the production. So this is, again, one of the things it is very important when you evaluate, when it's evaluated a bioeconomy program. The benefit needs to be tangible. Using bioeconomy, using bio-based materials, like in our case, need to give a benefit, a tangible benefit in terms of CO2 emissions in our case, so climate change and everything. So for sure, with our material, but also with our production process, we contribute to the general reduction of CO2 emissions in the atmosphere. Next. So this is what I was mentioning before, and what is moving us to increase our investment also with a second plant. So it's not only the possibility to have bioeconomy programs and strategies around the world, which is a good driver. I saw a question there, and I can say that bioeconomy strategies are for sure a good driver, helping company to understand where to invest. But if the governments are consistent and create a clear path, a clear way forward to also then support the companies after they decided to invest. And we see that in Europe, we don't have at the moment a clear picture in this sense. But anyway, this is the market. So as you can see, the bioplastic part is still very tiny. So for sure, one of the challenges that the bioeconomy sector has, especially with biomaterials, is to scale up. So biotechnology is a big driver to scale up for very sure, but it's very important to have consistent support from national legislation. It's like you can mention before the US program, but in many countries where there is a bioeconomy strategy, there is also consistent help and consistent support, like in Thailand. Next. And then we go Thailand. So this is what we are now building in our second facility. And really, one of the drivers for to choose this site was also connected with the fact that the bioeconomy for Thailand is something real and tangible. It's one of the ways that the government is thinking to move forward, to have big growth in the economy without harming the environment. The biodiversity is huge in Thailand, so there is clearly a necessity to grow in a sustainable way. So preserve also the natural ecosystem and the balance with the natural life. So it's something very important and is very relevant for us too. And we have already the experience in US, so we can really bring there our best practices and work together with the local communities and grow really in the following the bioeconomy principles, which are always related to sustainability of the biomass and sustainability of production processes. Next.
1 more minute, thank you.
Yeah, it's done. This is my last
right,
last slide.
Great timing.
The difference, the difference with the other plant is that we will have everything combined in one plant. So going back to the research point, our new plant is also an investment in research and is an improvement in technology because it will be even less intense from the production side than the one that we already have that is pretty already optimized. But this is going to be even better. So we are trying to continuously improve also the production processes. Next, which I guess is the final one. Yes, it is. So these are the stepstones. And we had our cornerstone ceremony February 1st. So we hope to be able to start the production in next year, maybe end of next year. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Mariagiovanna. I think we have now we want to bring the conversation into the role of investment. Well, we have investors, public investors, private investors, also players in the entire value chain. And I think the questions that we pose ourselves is how do we scale, right? And then what is the interplay between innovation, investment, and public policy? And we have 5 speakers. I mean, they will work as fire starters because I think I really want us to, there are a lot of expertise online and in the room so that we can sort of have a conversation around it. So we have, I'll just read out the names of the people so that you know who's like, we have Marco Johnson, who is the biopolymer business leader for EMEA and sustainability leader for Braskem. We have Neil Perry, R&D program director from Unilever. We have Nabil Moda, so Chief of Environment and Amazon Fund from the Brazilian National Development Bank. We have Caitlin Clark, she's Director of Policy and External Relations from BTG Pactual Timberland Investment Group, and John May, Managing Director of Hamilton Clark. So, so I'm going to ask you to speak because of the. So I'll start with Marcos, then with Neil. And then we're going to move into the finance and investor community. Then I'll have Nabil, Caitlin, and John May, if that's okay with you. So Marcos, you have around 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me see if I can share my screen with you. I think you can see it now, but not in presentation mode, right? Oh. Now you can see my screen in presentation mode, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I'm going to try to just spend a few minutes for the sake of time. So I'm not going to explain too much about Braskem, but feel free to ask me. But I'm going to share why the bioeconomy is so important for us, Braskem, and our industry. And so I just need to change my settings because I'm looking at myself now. So we have two really important goals. One is to make our industry and our business circular. And we are a petrochemical company, producer of plastics. And we want to make our company carbon neutral by 2050. And actually, these are goals that are aligned with, I would say, the overall industry, especially the one in Europe, that has, excuse me, a similar goal to create a carbon neutral circular economy by 2050. Within those goals, we have the goal of producing 1 million tons of bio-based plastics by 2030, as well as 1 million tons of plastics with recycled content by 2030. And specifically for the carbon neutrality goal, we have this ungreen bio-based plastic, which offers a significant reduction in carbon footprint. So for every kilo of plastics that you replace, or standard plastics that you replace with bio-based plastics, you can save up to 5 kilos of CO2. So it offers both tremendous advantages for Braskem to reach our carbon neutrality goals, but also for our clients to make their products carbon neutral or even carbon negative in some cases. And this is my last slide that I want to go through, because one of the key aspects of growing from a 200 kiloton or 260 kiloton business that we have now to a 1 million kiloton by 2030, and also the plastics industry as a whole. For instance, in Europe, it's expected to reach carbon neutrality as well as circularity. 15% of all plastics will need to be bio-based by 2050. So that will have a huge demand in natural resources. Just to highlight more the Brazilian case and our case specifically for Braskem, is that we have currently a very small, let's say, demand for land. 0.02% of the available land in Brazil is what we need to produce our current capacity. So we would have 0.1% of land use by 2030 in order to reach our 1 million ton goal. But of course, Braskem is only a small part of this. So what we need to ensure is that this is all sustainably sourced. And one of the big advantages of the Brazilian sugarcane industry is that it has a multitude of products that come out of the production, the harvesting and production of sugarcane. So sugarcane is used primarily to produce sugar, but with a secondary product, which is bioethanol, which is currently used for the fuel industry. And then there's a third product that is electricity that is generated from the production, from burning the residues of the production of bioethanol and sugar. So what happens is that you will have the initial press from the cane in which you extract the sugars. From those sugars you produce sugar from those juices. But then at the end, there's still about half of the sugars left in those residues, where you need to add a significant amount of water to extract those, and that will become very difficult to make sugar or high quality sugars from those. So what are most of the Brazilian mills doing? They are producing bioethanol, and currently most of the cars in Brazil, they are flex fuel cars, where they can use both bioethanol as well as petrol and gasoline to fuel the cars. And then Braskem in 2007 decided to take a small part of that bioethanol and actually to produce plastics out of those. And actually last month we finalized the expansion of our production by 30%, moving from 200,000 tons to 260,000 tons. And one of the big advantages of the material is that although it's made from sustainable biomass, it has the same characteristics and the same chemical structure as conventional plastics. And for that reason, it can be used in exactly the same applications, but at least as important is that it can be recycled within the same recycling streams. So you don't need to develop any new recycling streams or methodologies to recycle that. So mechanical recycling or chemical recycling, which we probably will develop over time, can be done exactly the same with the polyethylene that is produced from sugarcane as it is from conventional, whether that's from oil or gas. So these products are chemically the same. So this is why the bioeconomy is extremely important to Braskem. We will need to invest. I'm closing now. We will need to invest several billions to reach that 1 million goal. But also, if you look at the overall industry, if 15% of the industry has to become bio-based by 2050, that means investments of hundreds of billions in order to move in that direction. And that's for Europe alone. So with that, I want to close.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Neil.
Okay, I think my slides are going to be
coming online
then.
There.
Here we go. We go full screen. There you go. So I'm going to be very, very quick and rapid. So, I mean, I'm not going to talk about Unilever. I think most people know where Unilever are positioned. I think what I'm going to say is we're doing an awful lot of work in trying to harness biology as an enabler for what we call clean future, and the amount of ingredients that are used in order to make all the common products that are used today. So we either look at it in the terms of biosourcing, or if we understand how biology does it today, how do we then replicate that process in a very efficient way? So go to the next slide. So we have this strategy. This is in our home care business, which is the essence of making a clean future work. You need to have three key pillars to make this happen. So one is you still need to offer superior ingredients and to give some priority to consumers by superiority. We have to make those sustainable. And at the same time, we've got to do that in a great value perspective and way. If you fall flat on one of those three, you then don't make it happen. So if you go to the next slide. So one of the challenges that we're facing, clearly, we've got a lot of what we call black petrochemistry today that is being used to make a lot of the materials. And what we're looking at, we call it the carbon rainbow, where we're looking at different forms of carbon in order to derive our materials in a sustainable way. So you've got grey carbon, which is capturing waste gases and converting those into materials. We've got green carbon, which is effectively, you've heard already about plants capturing the CO2 and then converting into ingredients. Blue carbon, and then we've got purple carbon, which is actually just capturing from the CO2 from the air and converting those into ingredients. we can use those paths in each of those carbon streams to get to the ingredients we're looking for today, but they're new processes and new areas that need investment in order to drive them at scale, which can then be competitive to the petro versions today. If you go to the next slide. So what we're really looking at is you're going from a conventional production system to trying to scale all these new materials, and we are seeing them happen. We are seeing investment in big facilities. We are seeing people multi-valorizing one particular feedstock, and we're also seeing dedicated facilities being built. And these are the sort of things that we are getting involved in to try and support that transition and supply of those ingredients. So go to the next slide. So we have been, I'm just going to give you one journey. This is one journey. I'm a scientist, so I'm not a finance person. So we looked at how biology works in cold temperature. So if you want to do cold water cleaning and you want to stop people turning the washing dial up to 40 degrees, then you need enzymes and other materials that work at low temperature. So we worked how nature does it, and we started making those ingredients at scale. On the right-hand side, we also realize that nature makes its own soap. So why are we using petrochemicals? Let's use nature's soaps. And the only thing is, nature isn't an industry, and therefore it's not making them at large concentration. So we set out and said we're going to replace petrochemical soaps with natural ones. So how do we find those? If you go to the next slide. So we've spent over 10 years, and this one particular example, we looked at how biology makes a particular type of soap. It's a bug that makes a soap called rhamnolipid. Rhamno is a key, it's sugar, and it's connected to a bit of fat on the other end. And this is the process that we set up. It's with a company called Novamont. They built this facility in Slovakia. It can produce up to 10,000 tons. So we've gone from the lab to 10,000 tons. And this material performs better than petrochemistry. So when I mentioned we needed superiority, that's what we ended up with. So people in the room, here's two products. So this one was launched in Chile, and this one was launched about 2 weeks ago in Vietnam. And you'll see the technology is actually written on the front of this, and the technology is better for people's skin. So if you're hand washing on a regular basis and you're using conventional petrochemistry, you're damaging your skin. When you use these products, the consumers are coming back saying, this is fantastic, skin mildness, and I know I'm saving the planet at the same time. So if you go to the next slide, and you'll see how we kind of recycle and reuse all the CO2 in here. And the next slide. Keep clicking, I think it will come. So there you go. So we do realise actually to unlock this clean futures, you've got to do a number of these things. You've got to get carbon pricing. If we can get that in there, we've got to get investments. We've got to get multi-year commitments. The reason this works is that we convinced the supplier that if they build the factory and go and get finance, we will buy everything that comes out of that factory when it's ready. So whilst we don't invest in the steel in the ground, we were investing in the outcomes. And just recently, it's been announced, we've signed up with a couple more upstream. We can't wait. We don't want to wait till 2050. We want to do it sooner. So we don't want to wait for the chemical industry. We want to try and promote it and catalyze it quicker. And you'll see we signed a deal with Arzeda, which is about protein engineering, developing new enzymes. And the one at the bottom there is with Genomatica. We've recently, and this is pre-competitive, so we're working with our industry partners to look for sustainable oils through fermentation. So sustainable non-deforestation palm. And go to the next slide. Next, my last one. Click again. So we and another click. There you go. There you go. So what we're seeing is a new way. What is the future of ingredient manufacturing? It's not a big chemical plant. It is a biorefinery. We are seeing these happen. We'd like to see more of them. But it's all about multi-valorization of the ingredient. And what are we doing to help promote this? That bottom picture is Unilever with the University of Liverpool, where we have a facility called the Materials Innovation Factory. So we're trying to work out what chemistry in that feedstock gives you what benefit to the consumer. So we then can start to pull that through. So we work with the whole of that industry to work out what's the structure of your materials and what performance can we drive it, and then what's the business case, and then how do you scale. So it's a complete loop. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Neil. When can we buy this in England?
we need to make more.
All right. So that was, sorry, this is using my prerogative of chair. So Nabil, I'll hand over to you. We have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. I hope you can hear me well. Can you? Yeah, okay. Just to begin my speech, I will give one step back. I'm from BNDES. BNDES is the Brazilian Development Bank. We are a 70-year-old institution here in Brazil, and we have a very important link with the climate and environmental agenda in the country for the last 3 decades. I can say we were the first financial institution in Brazil that created environmental unit inside the bank. And from then, we are working a lot on financial innovations for climate and nature since then. So once we talk on bioeconomy, it's important to say what we mean when we talk. I know that we have many different perspectives of this agenda, and when I say we here at the bank, when we talk about bioeconomy, we are talking on biomes bioeconomy or forest bioeconomy. We are talking on how to maintain, conserve, and make a sustainable use of the biodiversity and the bio of our country. We are a very big country with 5 different biomes. You know, the most well-known is the Amazon.
Nabil, we have lost you. Let me check. Otherwise, we may have to get another speaker to. Nabil, we have lost you. So what we can do so that we can keep, Nabil, we'll try to get our teams online to get you back online. In the meantime, Caitlin. Sure. Would you mind stepping in?
No, very happy to step in quickly.
Thank you so much.
And there is a nice Brazilian forestry connection as well. So
Yes, thank you.
Caitlin Clark, I'm with the BTG Pactual Timberland Investment Group. So for those of you who are not familiar, we're one of the world's oldest and largest timberland managers, about 1.2 million hectares currently under direct management. And we're America's specialists. So that's in the US, Brazil, Chile, and Uruguay. In this context, I would describe us essentially as a producer of the inputs to the global bioeconomy. So we are forest managers only. We don't manufacture products. And we have a big focus on improving impact. So enhancing the benefits of our land management for these high quality inputs. I and 2 of my colleagues, our Chief Sustainability Officer and our Head of Impact Capital, are all recent alumni of the Nature Conservancy. So, so that is like a very clear focus for us, these climate and biodiversity benefits, and how this land management can link into the bioeconomy. I think there has been quite a bit of maybe angst about competing land uses, and that is important, but not necessarily, I think, a conflict. So that is one thing to keep in mind going forward. So we have, I think, growing interest and a lot more sophistication in the last couple of years from our investors who are interested in climate and nature policies and how their investments can support climate benefit as well as nature restoration. And I was asked to speak very briefly about policies. So I think we're all familiar with the national strategies that Yuka has outlined. They're very important. I'm not going to focus on that. I think a couple of things that are a bit more interesting are sort of indirect policies that support bioeconomy development and sort of deployment. So not necessarily direct subsidy, but I think any policy that is supporting low carbon development will sort of naturally favor bioeconomy, both inputs and outputs. And one great example of that here in the EU is the Nordic Declaration on Low Cost or Low Carbon Construction and Circular Principles, which is requiring buildings over a certain size to have a 12 kilogram of CO2 equivalent emission per square meter per year. And you have a lot of flexibility about how you meet that, right? But so one of the key ways that you could do that is to reduce your embodied carbon by using mass timber instead of a high emission concrete or steel structure. So that's one example. And I think any of those sort of high level policies that favor low carbon will favor the bioeconomy. Where I think things become a little bit more challenging is on the market governance policy side. This is where I spend the majority of my time on these sort of multi-stakeholder initiatives that are developing our climate and nature policy architecture globally. And I think a lot of these initiatives are quite challenging and sometimes at cross purposes with the development of a circular bioeconomy because they are built for a sort of old paradigm. I think permanence in particular as a concept, as we see in the EU taxonomy, has been, I think is going to be very challenging for sustainable forest management broadly. That's sort of one, I think, key problem for the deployment of these strategies. I also think the lack of sort of reasonable scope for accounting and incentives is quite difficult. For example, at Unilever, you can develop these great detergents that you use at low temperature, and that saves massive amounts of emissions, but you don't actually get any credit for it. And I think the lack of ability to do that, it would create incentives for companies to do more research and development that don't necessarily have to come from national policy. So I think we need to be quite focused on how markets can develop. If you can make money off of the bioeconomy, then you don't need to subsidize or incentivize it. So I would just encourage everyone, as we are sort of engaging on these kinds of policies, to really keep in mind the goals of circularity, regenerative economies, and to think about how we're incentivizing those and how we need to make this very, very rapid transition to a circular bioeconomy, and just think quite carefully about how the rules that we're setting in place for markets right now are either incentivizing or disincentivizing that transition. So
Thank you. Thank you. That was short and sharp. Thank you so much. Nabil, are you back with us now?
I'm back again.
All right. So floor is back.
The hybrid challenges.
Yeah.
So as I was talking, when we talk on bioeconomy, we are talking on how to generate value with the standing forest and all the value of our biodiversity. Brazil have been working a lot on biofuels and bio products since the 70s. So we had a very interesting business models for all these industries. As Braskem is here is one example of chemicals, for example. But we have a very big interesting challenge on how to develop specific financial instruments to support native forest business and how to support these supply chains, these innovations on these chains, technology for the production, for example, not only for the extraction or for the consumer use, but on how to produce these goods and how to put it in the market, how to understand all the life cycle of this product. So what I have to share in a very few minutes here is that we were working on different initiatives using blended finance and match fund, a lot of match fund and blended finance in the last 4 years. And every initiative that we launched, we tried to highlight that we would like to support solutions on forest bioeconomy. And for our surprise, what happened in all these situations that we did, even when we put with very concrete cases, for example, sustainable cities and forest bioeconomy, asking for projects or asking for innovative solutions, every time the bioeconomy access every time we received the most complex projects. The number of projects presented is much higher than in the other initiatives. So what we think about these results is that we have a very strong financial ecosystem, just waiting for this chance to show the solutions to be supported. And once we give the opportunity for them to show it off, we receive a lot of proposals. The blended finance case, we did a public call last year to ask for hybrid solutions to support forest bioeconomy. We selected from our side 30 million reais to support this project. We received proposals on almost 1 billion reais, more than 25 proposals, and we supposed to support only 3. So we have a very dynamic financial ecosystem for innovative solutions on forest bioeconomy, and that's why we are doing different products to try to select and attract this new investment. So we are here to share with you this experience. I have only 2 minutes and 3. It's the end of my very brief speech. Is just to say this message. When we talk on bioeconomy, we want to reach solutions to the standing forest. And second thing is that once we try to do something innovative, our financial ecosystem is ready to show very, very interesting, innovative solutions to be supported. And we have all of these to share and show for our audience.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Last but not least, we also have John May joining us. Thank you, John. You also have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it. I am a managing director at Hamilton Clark Sustainable Capital, which is a U.S. investment bank based in Washington, D.C., with 7 offices. We work all over the world, most recently Canada, EU, UK, Latin America, Asia. Our focus is sustainability and decarbonization in general, but in particular, we have a huge history in the bioeconomy. And for those of you on like Jeff Passmore, who I've known for years, know that I've been one of the leading biofuels, and today probably I am the leading sustainable aviation fuel investment banker in the world. Our approach really is to raise equity and project financing for 2 types of clients. Either early stage technology companies who have invented their own technology, or licensees of major international technology companies. So just to give you a quick look at clients that I've had in the past over the years, I've represented Fulcrum, Red Rock, Lanzatech, Gevo, Velocis, and more recently, I'm representing a number of licensees of Haldor Topsoe, Johnson Matthey, and Honeywell. What I'm doing is raising the development equity and project financing for the licensees in different parts of the world that are using these technologies. On the investor side, we have a global institutional investor market that we've built up over the 20 years that the firm's been in existence. So we call on private equity, venture capital, ESG funds, renewable infrastructure funds, commercial banks, private credit lenders, corporates, and strategics. We have a huge focus, as I said, on the bioeconomy. And what I would say is biofuels, bioproducts, so ethanol, cellulosic ethanol, sustainable aviation fuel, biodiesel, renewable diesel, e-fuels, synthetic fuels. We also go into bioproducts and biochemicals, including bioplastics, biopolymers, consumer products, bottles, food service, detergent, personal care, advanced materials. I have a new article coming out on SAF that is being written by one of the writers for Biomass Magazine. And I hope you will all read it when it comes out here in a few months. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So we are slightly overrun in terms of sort of the speaker, but it was a great session. I hope it kind of stirred up. I have a lot of questions. And so we're going to move into sort of, we have a lot of experts, also investors, people doing research, academics, and all of that in the room here. So I want to make sure that we're sort of capture that conversation. And I want to sort of replay back on what I heard, right? So for us to achieve all the global commitments of net zero, of preserving, conserving nature, of delivering the biodiversity objective, we will have to completely transform our economy, because we have already on track of decarbonizing our energy system, but we haven't decarbonized our material system. And actually that is one of the biggest challenge that we'll have to face, right? And so when I think about bioeconomy, it's that big challenge is the energy system, but it also is the material, it's the substitution effect. And I think we'll have to be able to do much more than climate, right? So it's not the tunnel vision, but it's circularity, it's other resource use, and also jobs. I think in a way I think the biggest challenge that we have is, what is the just transition element of it? How do we create a job? So when I think about bioeconomy, that's the big challenge that I think about we have ahead of us. And what I also heard is we talked about scale, right? How do you scale? We heard about the pan value chain approach, right? How do you connect the whole value chain? We heard about clusters of symbiotic relationship between industries. And this interplay, or more poetically, the dance between investment, innovation, and policy. And so I want to put that question to the room here and to the participants, like, it feels simultaneously that there's a lot of excitement. At the same time, we look at the numbers, it feels that it's really small compared to the current investment in the more mainstream stuff. The timing that we don't have ahead of us, right? So it just feels like a really, really high mountain that we have to collectively climb. So what is it that we can do? So I want to move us to the solution. Like, what is it that we can do? Who, in terms of, and sorry, I'm jumping around, just final also to say finance is an enabler, right? How can we ensure that finance is enabling this kind of transformation that we're talking about? And I know that there's a lot of participants as well, but I just want to sort of set the room like that. So we're, as people are participating here who are joining us in person, like, let's move into that and let's brainstorm in terms of what is it that we can take away so that we can take another step forward. Small challenge. And so, oh yes, I forgot to say, so this is why you have a name tag. So since you come here to Chatham House, if you have a point, you raise like this. And if you want to make sure that you say, if it's on the same topic, you can jump the queue, do a thing, wave your, so you stay on top, on the same on topic, okay? But don't abuse that jumping queue privilege, because otherwise you lose that privilege. Okay, so whoever has Maria, right? So I have Maria. Anybody else? Rocio. Oh, okay. So okay, now I have to take those. Maria, Rocio, Thomas, and George, and then we're gonna pick up people from online.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we'll do a couple. I'll just do a quick round. Let's see. So Maria, go ahead.
I'll try to make this quick. So one, I do agree with how you started off with the notion of principles. So actually, what are the principles of the materials system and how does that need to change? So one key principle is circularity. How do you enable a secure supply? When it comes to things like bioeconomy, I completely agree on this notion of principles around how to think about it. And I agree that permanence is not the right one. I'm encouraged that I think that, you know, when we talk about permanence, we normally do it in a compensatory way to carbon credits and nature-based solutions and the controversy around that. I'm encouraged that that language has shifted towards minimizing reversals, which is very important as a principle, because ultimately you have this very weird thing that people are more willing on to not support reforestation restoration just because of that. And so it's a weird one. And the third one I agree is that we do need principles around ensuring that when we do land management, it's not under competition, and what are the ways in which to think about it. So that's some of the very critical things to maybe get ahead of what I could see coming from the climate space, so many of the arguments around it. Second, Neil, in NatWest, we're always looking for procurers. We have 100 billion in climate and sustainable funding and financing, primarily to suppliers like yours. So let's talk, because that de-risks our capital to lend to something like that. And absolutely, in terms of some of the regulations, I'll just give you another example that hasn't been talked about is in terms of organic fertilizer replacing artificial fertilizer. One of the principal things there is regulations around on the spread of it. And so that's just another example. I'm thinking through another type of biomass, which also has supply chain issues, but also has regulatory issues in its application.
Thank you. I have Rocio, please. Also, sorry, I forgot to say, please introduce your organization as well, so that people online know.
Maria Carvalho, NatWest Group.
Thank you. Rocio Diaz-Chavez, I'm a senior research fellow at Imperial College London, and I can see that probably I'm working the first bioeconomy project that the EU Commission funded many years ago. And one of the things that it's really interesting. I mean, it was slightly mentioned, but not fully. Actually, this comes out from a report that was published by the Finnish government. And this is about how we are supposed to be changing from a nature-based economy to a fossil economy where we are at the moment, and now trying to move into a bioeconomy. So we are trying to move out from this one, the nature-based economy that lasted for many years, probably even before, up until the Industrial Revolution, and then we move and we are stuck there, with all the implications, all the benefits that it had at each time of that period, to the point where we are now, which we cannot avoid to say that climate change has been the driver of bioeconomy. It's not the only one, but it has been the driver. And I think that also because I've been working for so many years with bioenergy, this is an area where you can look at the land use and all the benefits that it has, the cascading of biomass, where all the bioeconomy also came out, and all the policies that particularly the EU set up in terms of the Green Deal. We still have differences in the definitions and how we interpret them. But I think that the aspect of the feedstock and the land continues to be important, because we are still competing. Each time, now of course, because of Brexit, we are with some differences in terms of the policies in the UK. But if you see all the research projects that are funded, particularly by the Horizon, which are the largest ones in bioeconomy, we are all competing with the same feedstock. It can be the forest one, it can be the agricultural residues, and even in Brazil and in other main countries in Latin America, this is starting to be an issue. I think that one of the problems that we have in terms of the financial side is that still many companies do not know about which are the funders, not just the research, for the implementation and the scaling up. And we in academia or in the research projects that we have, we rarely invite a financial company to join us in one of these research projects. Probably they will not have interest in that, but it will actually be something positive, I think, for both sides to know what they think it is possible to fund and what is really impossible, because that's the problem. We never, it was mentioned at the beginning, we cannot move to the next step of the scaling up. And my final point is on the sustainability side. I think that is still, it continues to be an issue for certain companies, for certain projects. It is still very difficult to move away from fossil fuels. So we are trying to see how we can reduce a little bit the fossil fuels so that we can really enter the new products, including fuels, and that we are not just adding up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thomas.
Thank you. Thomas Pickford from the Nature Conservancy. I should probably set the scene just briefly in terms of how we approach the bioeconomy. We mainly work on the bioeconomy in Pará State in Brazil. We're working very closely with the governor who was kindly spoke at Chatham House earlier this year on this very topic. And we're helping them to develop their bioeconomy plan. And we approach it from the aspect of a socio-bioeconomy, so also bringing in the different social services that come alongside it. And we conducted some research last year, and there's a paper on it which I can happily share, which kind of analysed the socio-bioeconomy in Pará State and the potential there. And what we found was that 90% of the producers of the bioeconomy are actually family smallholders. And so what we're doing is we're working to grow this bioeconomy because we see it as a way to both tackle carbon emissions, stop deforestation and preserve biodiversity. And we do so in a way that we can maximize multiple land use. So we work with the smallholders and family farmers to encourage agroforestry and the production of the bioeconomy products, which range from everything from rubber to acai, Brazil nuts, and we actually found that the 30 products that we analysed, they are as productive for the Pará State economy as cattle farming, but actually they produce more ecological services than cattle farming, so they actually produce more income for the economy. But in terms of kind of what we found from our research on the finance side is that a lot of it needs to come from policy. You know, there's a lack of investment and the lack of tax incentives which support these smallholders, but also investment from larger companies in the bioeconomy. Insufficient and unequal access to credit. Only 5% of the credit available in Pará State was going to family farmers. So if we can increase the credit flow, we can really support them in investing long term. Also, lack of payment policies for the carbon stock. So we really want to be able to, you know, multiply the benefits. So if they can increase their income from the carbon, that decreases incentives for deforestation, increases incentives for agroforestry. So if we can build up these different carbon policies, that also helps. And then a lack of finance mechanisms to remunerate environmental services. So one thing that we're developing with Pará State is a Payment for Ecosystem Services Fund, whereby it's just another incentive away from deforestation towards more bioeconomy products and sustainable agricultural practices. So on a small scale, but you know, that we can very much scale up across the state and then hopefully across Brazil as well. These are different policy levers and different finance mechanisms, which you see is really supporting the bioeconomy.
Thank you. And I have George, and then I have Marcos online.
Hi, George Dara from Systemic Capital. We're a climate tech investor at the earliest stage. So we come in probably in the second or third round of financing that a company typically goes for. So I can speak mainly from the venture capital angle, and I won't try to expand much beyond there. But I think it's important because a lot of these innovations are coming up through those early financing types. So the challenges we see for us as investors looking at investing into these companies really is the gap at the first of a kind. And then the timeline. I mean, Neil, I was struck that you spent a decade developing that process with Evonik. Like it's a long time, and I can see the kind of like the lots of millions of dollars that went into that. I know DuPont, Tate and Lyle, similarly with their organism. It's like the returns are just, it's a long time. So it's quite hard for us to look at that and say, okay, we can look at our LPs straight in the face and say, yeah, well, you'll see your money back before the end of the decade. And then the gap at the first of a kind, it's really difficult for us to put money in when there is a company doesn't have a compelling plan for financing that first of a kind asset. And that might be they know how to access specific types of non-dilutive financing, so government aid. But often it's a case of, well, we're just going to raise some equity, and we think like, because it dilutes everyone else who's in the capital stack. So a few things that when we see these things, it gets us very excited. I mean, that like any sort of structure like loan guarantees that help just de-risk kind of first incoming debt is extremely helpful. There's a few emerging, there's a company called Tuatara Capital who are like an emerging project financier who are happy to also take technical risks because they're engineers, they work deeply in the industry, and they're also financiers. And so there's just like these rare people who are, seem to be happy to put debt against technical risk. And then on the government side, I would love to see the UK, other places, the governments actually build out facilities where all of these companies can go and use that facility without having to build their own one for their pilot. Like having like high utilization, publicly funded, pilot to scale up facility, I think it just feels like a no-brainer because there's so many of these companies raising equity to build steel that kind of isn't the same as, but looks similar to the company next door. It's just a colossal waste of money. I would like to see more transparency around land use because I think the palm oil thing is interesting. You're using corn to produce palm oil, which and palm oil we all know is like the world's most productive oil producing plant on a per hectare basis. So those sort of things, I think, for us, like just bring a sense of trust in the system is being thought about. And then finally, I just wrote burning biomass in power station. I just put a cross through it. I think it's important that we are very careful about putting biomass to power. I think there are some cases where it can work. We spoke to a startup recently who are retrofitting coal-fired power stations in the US with CCS. They're doing BECCS basically, and then growing miscanthus around them because it's kind of like the appropriate farmland is around and they've got the supply chain. I think miscanthus can do like 10 tons of biomass per hectare per year or so. It's just extraordinary. So I think there are some specific use cases, but broadly, it's just, it's like the worst, the lowest thing we can send that into. So that is also certainly on my mind, more in a system level.
Thank you, George. I have Marcos, and then Jim, I saw your hand just come up, but you want to also have people coming online for questions?
Can I make a quick comment?
Yes.
It's John May. Can I make a quick comment on the last speaker?
Yeah, so that
I'll
you
keep it
using
super
your,
quick.
yeah, right, go ahead.
Okay, so, and Jeff Passmore asked me to bring this up. I hear this excuse from private equity and venture capital all the time. One of the things that I accomplished in my career was I helped invent technology risk insurance. Technology risk insurance is used in first commercial scale project financing. It's readily available from a number of large and small insurers all over the world. It does two things. It throws money at a project that isn't working and tries to fix it. And secondly, if that doesn't work, it pays off the debt. And if that isn't enough de-risking for my friend, you're in the wrong business.
Let's chat later, John.
All right, good. Sorry, Marco, you have the floor.
Yeah, just a few comments. Actually, you mentioned earlier that the energy sector is actually progressing well, right? But there's a reason why this is progressing well and why the material sector is not progressing well, because there's a lot of incentives to actually, let's say, have renewable energy sources. So I think that's the first point. And you can see that that's working very well. I think for materials, there are no incentives yet. They will come, I think, but there are no incentives yet. So I think this is something that is really critical. I think the second point is that you see a lot of incentives, especially in grants and subsidies for investment in R&D, but almost none for investment into building capacity, right? So I think you see, for instance, the Horizon budget that is allocated to R&D, but actually there's no budgets available for investing into building capacity for more sustainable solutions. So I think that's another gap that we see. And then lastly, there needs to be a cascading of the use of bio feedstocks, right? And right now, actually, the only one that's really incentivized is energy, which is on the bottom of the cascading pyramid of biomaterials, right? It should first be, let's say, fine chemicals and medical applications. Then it should go to food and feed. Then it should go to materials, and only then it should go to fuels and energy. But actually, the one that's only subsidized globally, I would say, in the US, in Brazil, in Europe, is energy. None of the others are, right? So I think there's a mistake in how we actually regulate, let's say, from a policy perspective, the use of these materials. So I think there's a lot of, let's say, without talking about venture capital or anything, I think if you would create a better demand by incentivizing the use of these materials and also reallocating the availability of bio feedstocks to the right applications, I think you would make some really big steps.
Thank you. I have Rocio, two finger.
Just quickly on that, because I also mentioned the cascading principle. And I think this is something that is true that the Commission has been given more emphasis on the energy side, but the Green Deal is actually improving a lot on the side of bioeconomy. Probably not as much as we want, but this is exactly the change that we have seen slightly for example, for bioenergy and biofuels, that it has started to give more emphasis into it. Maybe not exactly on the part of burning the biomass for energy production, but indeed for biofuels production. So we just need to give it a little bit more input into that. But I think that it is really clear in the Green Deal about the part of the top of this cascading principle with pharma. Now we are going back in some discussions here in Europe to, I think, almost to 2008 and 2010 in terms of biofuels production and linking it with circular economy and with bioeconomy. But that is actually not good, because they should be really going further. And I would like to ask just one more point, because the UK used to have, it had before as bioeconomy strategy, and it was changed into this innovation. So that really put us back compared to how the European Union is moving with the Green Deal.
Yeah, but if I may respond to that, again, fuel is on the bottom of the pyramid, right? It's way on the bottom of the pyramid. So they are incentivizing the use of sustainable raw materials for fuel, which is on the bottom of the pyramid, but actually they should start in the top and then work their way down. And if you look at the Net Zero Industry Act, for instance, that is response to the US IRA, it's all about energy, right? There's nothing about materials. So I think that there seems to be a bias to invest in energy sources, whether that's fuel or other energy sources. So I think there's a lot of work to be done to ensure that this cascading principle is taken more into consideration.
I think that's really clear. I'm going to hand, so Yuka has been doing the online management. So do you want to bring a couple of questions into the room from participants who are joining us, watching them?
Indeed, and okay, let's give a floor also to them. There are several questions, and there are some who are even more active than others. So I'd like to address, for example, Jeff is asking, this is only for the panelists. Let's ask on the panelists. So, to what extent do panelists think having a national bioeconomy strategy drives the sector forward faster than the countries that do not have a strategy, like Canada. Jeff is coming from Canada. So good point. The companies are still proceeding with projects in countries lacking the strategy. Any thoughts on that? Anything? This is not okay for the panelists. What do you think? Jeff, Jim, please.
On this issue about bioeconomy strategies, I said a few years ago, and I stand by it now, it's all very well making a strategy, but then you have to action all that. So it can be great for generating interest, but what countries haven't been so great at is the follow-up. So it can be a lot of hot air. And what governments really need to see is successes, actual tangible successes. Now, Marco, you were talking about the materials part of this. Now, I started in 2011 and I said there are no incentives for materials. So, but now we see small successes, and I think that is, to me, more important in the government sector than just seeing strategies which might necessarily go nowhere.
Any other comments?
I just totally agree.
Oh yeah, thanks, Marco. Yeah.
So what's really important is making sure we've got case studies, and even if the case studies are small, they are catalysts for actually enthusiasm and belief that it can actually be done. And it's not until we take some of these small ideas to a pilot scale and then start testing it, you then realize what additional benefits you then translate through at the end as well. So I think the whole idea of going for multi-valorization and working in kind of countries with partners, because the other important thing is every single year we stand up in front of the whole of the chemical industry and we say, we want green stuff. And and they're sitting there with all of this infrastructure around petrochemicals and they're going, really? So it's one of those that we're also kind of going, look, we're open to new players as well. And interestingly, what we're seeing is there's more companies coming to us we've never worked with before who are now starting to offer those benefits. And we're not wedded to where we've been. It's a portfolio play. You've got to be able to start to move. You can't just suddenly turn the taps on and off. It has to be a gradual thing, but it's being open for that. And I think that's really important to show that it is possible. And then from small things, bigger things happen.
Can you elaborate that a bit further? New players are coming into this space and new operators. So what makes that difference? Where do they come from? Why this now? Why it wasn't 10 years ago when it started this journey?
Yeah, I think there was this this nervousness around. There's a lot of technologies that need everyone's aware of the technology readiness level and this kind of value. I'm sitting in the finance team and I haven't heard anything like the valley of death, which I think I've been through a number of times, is that at the very start of that curve, there is a hell of a lot of burn rate. And it scares everybody.
Oh, yeah.
And I think for the last 10 years, there's been a lot of this burning. And now we're getting to technology readiness 4, 5, 6, 7. And you can then go, hang on a minute, now we just need the factory bit. We are starting to see that come through.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we're now starting to see some of the fruits come through, but there's been a lot of knowing when to invest and knowing when to come in. That is really important.
All right, very good. Then we have a question from Lily Manning. Very interesting work for the new packaging. Is there a process in place to close the loop post-use of these new plastics? Can anyone of the panelists elaborate about that? Can you take any notion? So what we do, we don't reduce the same waste issue we face currently. So any notion, any on this?
Well, I can comment.
Yeah, please, Marco.
Lightly. Well, I don't think, let me put it this way, I don't think bio-based plastics are a solution to waste. I think that's the first point. I think they are, let's say, they provide a contribution to reducing carbon footprint and dependency on fossil fuels. I think this is the primary role. And even some of these let's say, so-called biodegradable, compostable materials, they offer very little benefit in marine environments. At least most of them, very few do. So honestly, I think there's only one thing we should do is to avoid that it actually ends up where it shouldn't be. But okay, it's easier said than done. But I think we should not necessarily focus on solutions that should end up in the environment, right? So I think we should try to avoid things ending up in the environment. So just to summarize again, I don't think these plastics are designed to resolve the waste issue.
Yeah, they have different priorities there. Yeah, then let's move on then. Oching Park is asking the question: is biofuel versus biomaterials from lignocellulose the most abundant biomass, which would become first in terms of policy and technology? In today's presentation, sugarcane is used both for polyethylene and PLA in case Braskem and NatureWorks. Ling is neglected in both cases, so this is a matter of choice. Any notion on this lignin matter?
Yeah, I guess me again, but I think we choose the most effective solution right now available. I think both from a carbon footprint perspective and also I think most suitable material that we have. I'm not a technician, but one of the things I know about lignin is that it's not easy to use, right? You actually need to go through several steps in order to prepare the lignin to be available for the use of production of materials or plastics in this case. But then again, I'm not a technician, but I think economically it may be very challenging.
Yeah, I think if I can add to that, Marco, that one of the problems with lignin is its complexity, but it is a route into aromatics, and aromatics have kind of befuddled the bio-base for a long time, but it's this huge prize is waiting there. But once again, we're back to huge technological challenges.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. I think we were hearing today, let's say, investment examples from North America, Brazil, Asia. But what about Africa? There's a question about this. Any notion on it? That interesting examples. What are the opportunities for the bioeconomy in Africa? Would anyone here like to comment on it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm referring to something which is called the Landscape Resilience Fund, which is a product of Chanel, WWF, and South Pole. But I think what they have is for the waste products of cocoa plants, because I think it's in Ghana, they use that to create another sort of drink that has gotten a lot of, so it's just some of those examples of circularity of using like you do with sugar cane, using byproducts of an existing thing and then repurposing it to something that can be used further. That's a example, but I imagine things like cocoa, things like a lot of the different products you could create a circularity or at least a reduced waste stream.
Indeed. Good point. Rocio.
Thank you. Yeah, I was actually based 4 years and a half in Kenya, and I coordinated the bioeconomy strategy for East Africa. So 9 countries, and we saw not just the potential, but there are already several companies working on bioeconomy. There were, for example, companies already working on bioplastics using starch from roots from different plants. There is a lot of there were a lot of pharma and multi superfood products, for example, that have already been there. Health as well. So there are several companies and initiatives already working on that. South Africa, of course, they have a lot on biotechnology that they are pushing very much bioeconomy, and in West Africa it's a little bit less compared to East Africa, but West Africa invest, for example, again, maybe it's the base of it, but they focus a lot on biogas, but it is still part of bioeconomy. And there, of course, there is the whole potential.
Let's take Nabil first. He has been to raise the hand for and then Maria. So Nabil, please.
Yes, we again, it's important. I think we have different discussions on how to finance the bioeconomy. One is how to develop these new products to substitute the high carbon emissions one. But another thing is related to the production of the bioinsumes. Who will produce it? In which way? Are we considering or not the maintenance of the biodiversity, or we are talking on plantations of only one culture for all to support this new products? So I think we have different discussions in both sides of this agenda. One discussion is related on how to invest in technology, business models, to make this production to be competitive, to be very well substitute for the carbon ones, more high carbon intensive ones. But another discussion, and it's not an easy one, is related to the production for this for this new industry that will be raised. And I think we have to try to set some principles for this production, not to be that harmful as, okay, we are doing well for climate to low carbon, but we are destructing all the biodiversity or destructing all the different ways of production. How to balance this? This is a very challengeable thing and need to be discussed, and how to finance it, how to find the good business models for it, because there is something very specific. When we talk on where these products are produced, Africa, Asia, Brazil, South America, okay, we have a limited space as we want to protect our biomes, our forest. So again, the thing that I said in the beginning, how can we find business models that maintain the forest, the standing forest, and producing the products that we need to this new economy? How to deal with this? How to deal with this here in Africa, in Asia? Because the equation is not that easy. So that's why I said that we are focusing a lot on how to finance new instruments in the side of the production, not to lose these principles, and then how to put a lot of effort on technology, new models of production of these new products. So I think we need to segregate these discussions to understand on what thing we are talking about.
Sure.
On the side of technology and new products, or we are talking on the side of production, and the challenges are completely different.
Okay, yeah, good point. Balancing between these different expectations. But Maria, you had a comment.
Yeah, I was just going to say quickly, absolutely agree on principles, and also thinking about, you're right, and I really do think the materials have to be at the material economy level, and to think that through, because then you start looking between bioeconomy and alternatives. The second thing I was just thinking about Africa, and that's the idea of, we've been talking a lot about products, we haven't talked about services, so tourism as a service and the protection of areas in which you actually, there are a lot of different conservation projects that through the service of tourism, you can actually enable something for governments.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's very seldom mentioned in the biostrategies. There are very few out of these 60 biostrategies worldwide. There's only few talking about this ecosystem. Yeah,
and
service.
To that point, like, there's a lot of bioeconomies that are integrated into the built environment that provide cooling services or regular microclimates and things like that. I think those need to be called out a lot more to recognize that for other types of systems like property or stuff, it actually provides a service that we would undervalue.
It is one interface more, but we have to face that. Yeah, then, okay, Thomas, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on what Nabil was saying. I think it's really important that we do need to build off principles of those. And also in terms of the different mechanisms for ensuring a just transition, kind of coming back to what you were saying, Anna, we need to be making sure that the finance incentives are reaching the producers, and we also need to make sure that those benefits are being distributed equitably. One of the most important things that we identified in our research in Brazil was land rights and recognising the rights by PLCs, making sure that they have that recognition and they hold the land, they hold the titles themselves to the land so they can actually access the benefits for it. I think it's really important that we're recognising that just transition, land recognition and PLC rights within the whole transition to a bioeconomy.
Yeah, very good. Yeah,
we're coming almost to the end, right?
yeah.
But before we end, I actually wanted to make to build on Nabil's point and on Thomas' point, and actually you guys just gave me a good excellent opportunity to plug a report that we did as well. So I actually slightly disagree with you, Nabil, about we have to separate the conversation. I think it has to be one conversation. I think the problem is we keep on separating the conversation and we suffer the unintended consequences when we push things in one way and we actually don't understand the impact that it happened on the ground. The transformation of bioeconomy is an interplay between supply and demand, and it's intrinsically connected. And I think that's the important bit, right? Which is the demand signals that we need to be clear about the services, about the products, different kind of substitution, right? We talked about materials, but also we didn't talk about building materials today, which is huge, right? So there are all of that in terms of the need of the decarbonization of economy from energy and material, whether it's for daily use material or building materials. Then there is a really critical conversation on the resource on the ground, right, which is land competition, obviously, other things as well, other kind of resource use, and the trade-offs and unintended consequences, right? What are the implications in terms of job transition? Because otherwise it feels, and this is where, like, we sit here at Chatham House, we feel like there are 4 different conversations happening at the same time, instead of like one big conversation where things have to be connected, with the principle that whatever bioeconomy that we're talking about, it cannot drive for more deforestation and conversion, right? It needs to give more value to any kind of natural system, whether it's forest or not. And we can start from that and then say, what are the trade-offs, right? What does it mean in terms of land use change? What does it mean in terms of transformation of agricultural practices? Is it going to be monoculture? Is it going to be polyculture? We don't know. But the question is, if we don't connect those things, 5 years, 10 years down the line, we're still going to end up on the same place because we drove the conversation in a specific direction and we're going to end up not being where we want it to be. Sorry, this is me slightly being, you know, looking at this for a while to say we have to make these connections. I lost my coolness as a chair for this comment.
Yeah, this was sort of the conclusion remarks.
Oh, that didn't mean it to me in that way. But before I close, I wanted to offer opportunity as a key takeaway for each of the panelists who's been here as the speakers. When Caitlin had to leave, do you have a 30-minute reflection that you want to share with the room? No, 30 seconds, sorry. So I'm going to start with the people who are still with us online. 30-minute reflection from this conversation, the speakers, that you would want to sort of as a key takeaway. Anybody? I'm gonna Marco, because you're on the right hand side of you. I'm gonna go Marco, Jim, John, Nabil. Let's do that.
Well, I think the reflection is that there's a lot to be done still. I think the bioeconomy offers potential for many different reasons. So I think there's still a long way to go in order to scale this. I think where it needs to be.
All right, I'm not sure I caught you there, but if you can type your comments, because I think the signal went slightly choppy. Jim?
Yeah, I think, I mean, raising the money in the public sector, many of us will agree that one of the best ways to do this is through tax incentives. And that's proving challenging, but let me talk about something we haven't actually mentioned so far, is can anybody tell me why the largest subsidy system in the world is for fossil fuels when it's over 100 years old? There's a big pot of cash which governments could use, but trying to change this thing, the OECD's been at it for about 20 years, there is enormous resistance to reforming fossil fuel subsidies.
Yeah. John?
I don't have any comments. Thank you.
Short and sweet. Nabil?
My comment is to say that I'm totally agree with you. We need to make the discussion in a more whole perspective, because although we will just see one side and without all the consequences and the opportunities that we have in our hand, I said it many times, we need to look to the opportunity side. We have a lot of challenges, but we have the chance, a very specific chance to change some realities, to have more conservation plus economic results and in social inclusion. We have this opportunity in our hands, and we need to make it in this basis, although we will make a more unequal result. So we cannot think on future without thinking in diminishing inequalities inside countries and between countries. So
absolutely. Neil.
My closing comment would be that I think everybody needs to overexpress their persistence gene, because what we can't get away from, I've done this on a number of occasions, whether it be inventing pregnancy test strips, or we did the antifreeze peptide that went into ice cream. All these projects have a common factor, and they are all between 7 and 12 years journeys, from idea conception to implementation. And you go through that entire journey. So the most important thing is that we have to go on those types of journeys, and there's no getting away from, if we want to make big, different impact, you have to go be in it for the long run. But you have to start the investment now to get the benefit later. And the biggest transition I'm seeing in our business is that they're all looking at us and saying, now even the marketeers are saying, we're benefiting from the things you started 10 years ago. And I think that as a community, we just have to sow more seeds for that case.
Love that.
All right, yeah. I could say also something about this. Okay, I fully agree. This is a long journey, but I think it's reminded also about this concept of the bioeconomy, as we are hearing here today, different type of notions about it, and we need to simplify that, okay, message one way or another. Even though there's a lot of interfaces within the bioeconomy, as we heard, okay, how it is in Brazil, how it is in US, how it is in Europe, how it is in Thailand. So that's the one way to get that across. And I think the one way to do that is that, okay, that the bioeconomy itself deserves to have the better recognition. It's the very same like, okay, climate change mitigation, very complex matter. But still people do have a notion on it, and they are working on it. And sometimes it's costly way to doing that, but people do understand. And it took about, let's say, okay, 30 years. The bioeconomy was very first time mentioned in that, okay, COP 27. So I think, okay, we really need to work on it. And it does not mean only, okay, that you'll be bringing, okay, additional cost, as we are hearing, like Neil very well described, good showcases about that, okay, what kind of bioproducts will then bring the new type of features from this sector. So let's keep on working on it. We are all insiders on it, and okay, and I hope that, okay, we can all also participate on this survey what we have it, okay, launch. And I'd like to thank all the panelists, all the speakers, and all the participants. Okay, very vivid discussion, and special thanks to Anna Young to moderating this all. Okay, very let's say multi-dimensional task to handle. So thanks about that, and okay, we keep on going here to discussing about this topic. And I've reminded, okay, if you miss some part of that, you can always have a look on the broadcast on YouTube. We will be there, okay, published it, okay, next week or so. With this word, have a nice summer and have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
And okay, bye-bye.
Bye.